Artificial sweeteners, also known as both non-nutritive and high-intensity sweeteners, have been around since the late 19th century. In fact, the first artificial sweetener ever created is saccharin. Saccharin was created by mistake in a laboratory at Johns Hopkins University in 1879. And since the 1970s, the FDA has approved 6 artificial sweeteners, or synthetic sugar sweeteners, for use as food additives here in the United States. Artificial sweeteners are often used in many foods, beverages, and medicines to provide sweetness without the additional caloric value that sugar would typically provide. For this reason, many individuals do use artificial sweeteners to curb their overall caloric consumption, since artificial sweeteners have low to no calories. They also use it to manage blood sugar spikes, especially in the case of diabetes. Aspartame, especially, is something to be looked out for if an individual has something known as PKU, where they have issues with metabolizing an amino acid known as phenylalanine. They are at risk for allergic reaction to aspartame, so they should limit or completely avoid aspartame, as well as some other food items. Apart from that, Perlman et al. Does acknowledge how the gut microbiome may be altered by artificial sweeteners. More research is needed, but the studies that were analyzed basically showcased that glucose homeostasis can potentially be affected by artificial sweeteners, and increased caloric consumption can result from the decreased satiety that's present when an individual is consuming something that has no calories. Still, there was a meta-analysis performed by Goosen et al. In the National Library of Medicine that acknowledged, while weight loss is often spotty in terms of research with artificial sweeteners, there are many studies that indicate that it might be counterproductive. There was also many randomized control trials, particularly one over a 12-month period looking at overweight individuals who consume artificial sweeteners instead of water, and it found that those that consumed artificial sweeteners, artificially sweetened beverages, opposed to water, actually lost more weight over that 12-month period than overweight people that just consumed water. Cyclamates are an artificial sweetener that were banned in the mid-20th century because of their highly carcinogenic effects. And while there are studies, as Goosen et al. Does acknowledge, in rats that showcases a connection between cancer and artificial sweeteners, that does not transfer to humans. And the FDA acknowledges and emphasizes that as long as an individual consumes artificial sweeteners within the acceptable daily intake range, you should be fine. And it does bear no carcinogenic risk. So here we can see, and I will have to submit a photo for a closer look. Aspartame, saccharin, ACE-K, sucralose, neotame, and advanatame all have sweetness levels that are either hundreds or thousands of times greater than traditional table sugar, meaning much less is needed in order to sweeten a beverage. They're found in many diet sodas, Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, Sprite Zero, or just to name a few. The carcinogenic risk this is actually from the study from the National Library of Medicine by Goosen et al. That does completely represent that there is no cancer risk from these 6 FDA-approved artificial sweeteners. Here you can see the acceptable daily intake of artificial sweeteners. Again, I will submit an image of this so that it can be seen better. I apologize. 75 packets of aspartame, 23 packets of ACE-K, again 23 of sucralose, and neotame are needed in order to cause more than that to cause side effects. Now, as far as advanatame, the most recently approved FDA artificial sweetener, you would have to consume 4,920 packets to reach the acceptable daily intake, and saccharin would be 45 packets. So as you can see, it takes a considerable amount of artificial sweeteners to exceed the acceptable daily intake range. Based on the FDA research as well as the other two articles, artificial sweeteners are generally recognized as safe by the FDA, and so should be consumed in moderation and within the recommended acceptable daily intake ranges. An individual should monitor their overall caloric intake and disallow themselves from eating extra calories simply because they have had a sugar-free item. But overall, the safety of these 6 artificial sweeteners has been proven, and artificial sweeteners should be looked at as generally safe and potentially beneficial as far as weight loss and diabetes control are concerned, due to their low or no calorie content, as well as their general lack of effect on blood sugar glucose.